The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
This is probably going to be completely meaningless to you, but it's meaningful for me. We're in a brand new studio today, a gorgeous new studio on our location right here on Jennifer Street in beautiful Friendship Heights. Now, I no longer have a window to the outside on the studio, the new studio, so I really can't tell you how gorgeous it is outside or whether it's pouring down rain or snowing or whatever, but we have the sounds of silence. Yeah, you don't hear beeping horns, you don't hear cranes, you don't hear jackhammers. Oh man, this is nirvana. And again, probably meaningless to you wherever you may be listening, in your car, or maybe you're listening on the podcast, on your phone or your laptop, whatever. But it's good to enjoy the new technology and the beautiful new studios. And we thank the engineers for making that happen. We will get to what happened on Monday Night Football last night. Dan Quinn held his news conference yesterday. Nothing really too revealing after looking at the tape from Sunday's awful game in Tampa. He also had a conversation with Chick Hernandez, which he does every week. We'll play some of that for you at 10 o'clock. And it was 35 years ago today that Deion Sanders, 5 days after hitting a home run for the New York Yankees, returned a punt 68 yards for a touchdown for the Atlanta Falcons. That's a Guinness World Record, and it's a record that I don't think anybody's going to break. With the money that's now paid out in both sports, I can't imagine that anybody these days would attempt to do both. Bo Jackson probably did it better than anybody, didn't do it very long because of the hip injury that he suffered, but Bo Jackson being both the MVP of the baseball All-Star game and playing in the Pro Bowl in the same seasons is absolutely remarkable. Deion was remarkable as well as a two-sport athlete, and to do that, I can't imagine that anybody will come along and break that. So talk about unbreakable records. Deion Sanders, home run, punt return in the same week. All right, I'll get to a lot more thoughts on the Commanders coming up in about 20 minutes. Tom Lovero's got a column, a couple of points that he makes that I want to get to, and some other things as we roll along this morning. But we did have Monday Night Football last night. We had the much ballyhooed return of Aaron Rodgers, who was, right? I mean, what did you see out of him that was really spectacular? Nothing other than he lasted more than 4 plays. His numbers, not that good. Completed 13 of 21 for 167 yards, and even had to give way to backup Tyrod Taylor when the game got out of hand in the fourth quarter as the 49ers won it 32-19. And along the way, and I watched the Manning cast last night. I usually watch the Manning cast when the Commanders aren't playing on Monday Night Football. They got a game in a couple of weeks at Cincinnati. But if it's a game that I'm not as invested in, I'll probably watch the Manning cast. I'm watching last night and just thinking about Brandon Aiyuk and all the drama in the offseason. Where's he going to go? He made it clear that he wanted to come here and play with Jaden Daniels, who had been his quarterback at Arizona State, and at one point said the 49ers don't want him anymore. Reports are that they had a deal in place for him to go to Pittsburgh. And at the last second, he said, okay, I'll sign for what you're offering. And that offer had been on the table for weeks. He got $120 million and 4 years, 120, so $30 million a year. And I was just thinking about, had he come here and certainly been a part of what happened on Sunday in Tampa, I don't think he would be happy. And I just wonder how good he would be having sat out almost all of the preseason. And sure enough, last night with Brock Purdy at quarterback and the Mannings doing the Manning casts, and they had Bill Belichick with him. I guess Belichick spends the first half with them. He's old. He's even older than I am, so probably has to go to bed, but does sit with them for the first half. And Brock Purdy had a wide-open Brandon Aiyuk in the end zone. Aiyuk had it in his hands, and he dropped it, prompting this from Eli and Peyton.
Aiyuk, he's a little rusty, Pate. He's missed all training camp.
Get signed, get in training camp. There's a reason for training camp when you need it. We need the reps.
Oh,
Get those contracts done earlier so we can get in training camp. We don't drop balls on opening night.
Right, it's probably one thing catching passes, running routes. All of a sudden you're laying out for a pass, full speed, diving. That's why, yeah, those happen in camp. You make those, you practice those. That's just a little rusty right there.
You're still catching balls in a high school field from some quarterback that's 45 years old, my age. You're not catching balls from your quarterback. Get signed, get in camp, and we don't drop the ball.
That's Peyton Manning as an ex-player. I wonder how that plays if he's still active. Would he say that about one of his own wide receivers when he was playing for the Colts or the Broncos? That's interesting. It's the transition that they make from player to analyst. But, yeah, he's absolutely right. Brandon Aiyuk not participating in practices. He was what they call a hold-in. So he wouldn't forfeit money and fines. He showed up. He went to the meetings, but Peyton Manning's right. You got to get your timing down. Didn't wind up hurting San Francisco as they won the game. Brock Purdy, 19 of 29, 231 yards, and was able to lead the team to the victory. The big thing about this game, and there's a little bit of controversy about this, is I guess it's possible the 49ers will get a fine on this, but they did not reveal until a couple hours before the game that Christian McCaffrey wasn't going to play. And in his place was Jordan Mason, an undrafted free agent who was terrific. Mason had 147 yards and a touchdown on 28 carries. And they also got a bunch of field goals from Jake Moody, kicked 6 of them for them. But obviously he was not missed, McCaffrey, but they do have some protocols on reporting injuries. And according to what Mason said after the game, he was told about this on Friday. Now, maybe the 49ers will say, well, yeah, we told him about the possibility that he might have to play because we didn't know about McCaffrey, but we didn't necessarily say you're absolutely playing. And then Mason, who's a young guy, he told this to Lisa Salters on the field after the game, said, this is why I don't talk to the media. Well, you're the one that revealed that on Friday you were told that you were going to play in his place. But regardless, the 49ers win. They win without arguably their best player. And Scott Van Pelt talked about it last night after the game with Troy Aikman and Joe Buck.
I mean, it's surprising on one hand. On the other, it is Kyle Shanahan. They do have Debo, who they can give it to. And then this young man, Jordan Mason, who just went off and ran hard, and the offensive line did their job. When McCaffrey is healthy, and now you have this from Mason, it's impressive. So you don't have McCaffrey, and it didn't hurt him in week 1, and they get to not push McCaffrey in week 1. That's like winning a doubleheader if you're the 49ers, if you can keep him healthy and he didn't exacerbate that injury here tonight.
Sure, Troy, and I think, I'm sure you lived through this, right? Somebody steps forward. That's the old analogy in this sport or any sport, next man up. But as good as McCaffrey is, no one's saying the guy's going to get Wally pipped and lose his job here. But is a performance like Mason provided tonight against this rugged Jet defense something that earns him time moving forward regardless of McCaffrey's health when he is okay?
Well, I think it does to some extent. I also know that Christian McCaffrey is such a weapon, and they can utilize him in so many ways, and they want to do that. But, yeah, Jordan Mason, he definitely gained some confidence in the eyes of the coaches and what they were able to accomplish. We talked about it during our game, Scott, just that whether it's been Kyle Shanahan or his father in Denver, Mike Shanahan, they've been able to take guys who have pretty good vision and run hard, and they've been able to make really good backs out of these guys. I didn't really know what to expect from Jordan Mason. I couldn't be prouder of the young man to get his first NFL start against this defense and do what he was able to do. I can only imagine how good he feels and what a celebration he's going to have with his mom and his family and everyone who was here tonight.
The conversation with Lisa down on the field, just great stuff. And you hear stuff in the preseason, and he played well, but this isn't against the 2s or the 3s with all due respect. This is good on good on as big a stage as there is in the sport, and he was exceptional. On the other side, so much curiosity about how Aaron Rodgers would look. So I ask you, Troy, how'd he look?
I think early on he was not able to really get into much of a rhythm. I think maybe if a couple balls are caught that aren't caught, it changes the way a quarterback feels and how you get things going. And they had the one good drive after the third drive. They struggled early, and then you felt like, okay, they've started to figure this thing out. But Scott, the way that I looked at it, it had, first of all, a little less to do with the Jets offensively or Aaron Rodgers and more to do with the 49ers. And that's how I saw it. I thought Nick Sorensen came up with a great plan. These guys played hard. But I know when Mike Williams is fully incorporated into this offense, he's going to help. Lazard really didn't do much until later in the ball game. But I still think this is a team that's capable of being really, really good. They've just got too many good players. And Rodgers he's going to play at a high level. We certainly believe that. But this was a humbling night for the New York Jets. There's no doubt. It would have been a huge win for them to come here and win this game against this team. But to not play better than they did, it's pretty deflating.
Yeah, easy for Troy to say. I would say deflating, and you probably wouldn't want to say that around Tom Brady. Ha, 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 ha. But is he going to get better? He's 40 years old. He played meaningful football for the first time in 20 months, other than a brief stop in the preseason last year and the 4 plays that he played in the Monday night opener last year. He is only the 22nd quarterback in the Super Bowl era to play after his 40th birthday. I can think of certainly Tom Brady, who won a Super Bowl after 40, and George Blanda, who was the MVP of the league in 1970 when he was 43 years old and coming off the bench to rescue games for the Raiders as a quarterback and kicking game-winning field goals. But there aren't many past the age of 40 who have been successful doing it. Now, I remember Sonny Jurgensen playing his last season in 1974, led the league in passing percentage, but he was in and out of the lineup with injuries. It's tough to stay healthy. So you're looking at Aaron Rodgers for the next 16 games. He looks a little different when he runs now after the Achilles injury. He's not a big, fast runner like the young quarterbacks of today. That's not his game. His game is accuracy. His game is finding the open receiver, the check downs, the whole thing, drawing people off sides, which is what he did on the Allen Lazard touchdown pass. Got a free play out of that. But we'll see. Aikman being nice there, maybe he's going to get better, but he was very average last night. Now, some of that you could blame on, well, he didn't play any in the preseason, so they didn't get their timing down, and it's going to take him a while to knock off the rust that he's going to get better. He says he feels fine physically, and said after what was really a lopsided game, not just the fact that his offense didn't perform all that well. Shockingly, the defense, which was the strength of the team last year, is like when Aaron Rodgers went out, what was the discussion? Oh, man, they really blew it having Zach Wilson as their only backup quarterback. They should have gone out and gotten a veteran because they're wasting a Super Bowl defense. Well, with much of this defense back, the Jets gave up 8 straight scoring drives, something they had not done in 45 years. So, that's a level of concern there. Yeah, it's the 49ers, and the 49ers, heck, they could get back to the Super Bowl again. I mean, we're looking at the possibility, especially what we saw from Kansas City in the opener, that we could have a rematch of the Super Bowl. But it's got to be a little bit concerning to the Jets, and the fact that they couldn't stop anybody last night without San Francisco's best player, Christian McCaffrey, and that the quarterback that they're basing everything on, all their chips are in the middle of the table on now number 8 for the Jets. And, I mean, if his name wasn't Aaron Rodgers last night, what would you say about him? You'd say, I don't know. He says he feels great. He also said after the game, he said about the 49ers, they're a championship-level group, and I hope we see them again. Yeah, well, that means you get back to the Super Bowl as well as they do. Rodgers and none of his starters had played in the preseason, so that may have contributed to the timing and so forth. He was sacked once, pressured only 5 of the 22 dropbacks, so he does get rid of the ball quickly. But on passes of 10 yards or fewer, he completed only 5 of 12 for 46 yards and an interception, not counting design screens. He finished the day with a 10.7 completion percentage, below expectation, which is his worst mark since 2021, the third of his 4 MVP seasons. So, it's week one. We always say this. It's a kaleidoscope league. What you see one week doesn't necessarily mean what you're going to see the following week. A lot of times it's matchups. A lot of times it's how certain players play, injuries that happen in the game over the course of the season, all those things. But I would say if you're a Jet fan now and you were hoping that the return of Aaron Rodgers would automatically make you a Super Bowl team, I would say that you're probably a long ways away from feeling that at the moment. I mean, the time may tell, and over the next 5-6 weeks, they may pick up some steam. Remember this. And although Rodgers has been with the Jets for over a year, didn't play much at all last year, but remember when Tom Brady led the Buccaneers to the Super Bowl, and remember how they had to get there. It included a wild card game that was played here. True, the Commanders, or then the Washington football team, will finish 7-9, but they were a playoff team, and Tom Brady had to win on the road, and he had to win the 4 games in order to get to the Super Bowl. So, and at the beginning of the season, there was definitely an adjustment period. Some of it may have been related to the pandemic, that they didn't have the time to get everything done going to his new team, but it was a slow start for Tom Brady, and with the Jets, it may wind up being the same for Aaron Rodgers. We shall see. Coming up, comments from Dan Quinn yesterday in Ashburn. And
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
So be honest with yourself if you're a Commanders fan. You had probably a lot of optimism going into last Sunday's game, right? I mean, probably related to the fact that they've been selling sunshine for a long time here. Not necessarily last season when it was too late to take over, though it was a breath of fresh air with new ownership. And the games did sell out, but we're still seeing, especially for division games and even not division games, because I was at the Miami game and it was mostly aqua in the stands, that it was a little bit different than Snyder, but still going to home games was like going to road games. And maybe that changes to some degree this year. I think we're going to still see a lot of blue in the stands on Sunday, though the Giant fans got to be disgusted with their team. They were all worse than Washington was on Sunday. But you probably had some optimism that may have been unfounded. And Tom Lavero wrote a column today basically saying, what did you expect here? He says more than half of the new roster consists of players replacing the washouts that Ron Rivera brought in. Remember, he's expecting his Super Bowl ring to be sent to his forwarding address. Remember when Rivera said that last year about his job security? He said, if they got a Super Bowl team next year with 40 guys that we brought in, please send me my ring or something to that effect. Remember that ridiculous comment that he made? In retrospect, looks so foolish because they shipped out half of his roster, and it looks like his last 2 picks, one of whom they've already disposed of, as they sent Jahan Doxson to the Eagles, and it looks like Emmanuel Forbes can't play. In retrospect, that looks, well, it's not even funny. It looks just sad as to the team that he put together here. But Tom goes on to say about Dan Quinn, the coach who told reporters after the loss Sunday, you don't want it, but you need it. That happened tonight. And Tom writes, no one needs to tell Washington football fans about struggle. This isn't a honeymoon. We're talking about victims here. Here's what else those fans don't need. Sales pitches about secret sauces, accolades about the speed and discipline of the offense in practice, praise of how close the team is being ready to compete. None of that was visible on Sunday, just the opposite. He writes, Jaden Daniels ran for 88 yards and 2 touchdowns, only the second rookie in NFL history to rush for 2 scores in his debut. He ran for 56 yards in the first half, the most by a rookie quarterback in franchise history. This, though, is not supposed to be his only weapon, which is my point, and you'll hear Quinn address that. But most egregious, and this is his side of the ball, he promoted Joe Witt, who Joe Witt was with him in Dallas as the secondary coach. Quinn comes here, makes him the defensive coordinator, and the secondary was god-awful. It really was. And Emmanuel Forbes did something that I'd never seen before. He got 2 penalties on one play. He got a face mask and a pass interference call on the same play, and both penalties were enforced setting up a touchdown for the Buccaneers. Now, okay, they played against some really good receivers, big receivers, and a veteran quarterback who took his team to the playoffs last year. Baker Mayfield did that. So as Quinn looked at the secondary play on tape on Monday before talking to the media yesterday afternoon, the question was asked, was it more of what you did or that you were just facing a veteran team with great receivers and a quarterback who was really accurate?
Tip my hat to them, to Mike and Chris and Baker. They played well. The thing that I would say I would certainly like to see better upon us, if you win a 50-50 contested ball and they go up and get it, like that's football. What I do want to see better from us is our pre- and post-snap communication. And there were a few instances where that wasn't as strong as it needs to be. And so as a defensive coach, a lot of times I said, okay, this is going to come out, and we're going to establish that we can do this type of communication all the time correctly. And that's where I'm at on that, Dave. So there was a couple instances in the ball game where pre- and post-snap, it just has to go down perfectly. And when it doesn't, you take a few things out to make sure that it goes correctly. I can certainly remember having that conversation with Tony Dungy years ago. Nope, we're not adding. In fact, we're taking out. And I think it was probably true back then, and it's still true today as you're getting into the season. Let's make sure you nail this every single time. The contested catches, the ones that are 50-50, I can go fight for those.
So he's blaming it more on communication than anything else. Look, he's not going to say we really whiffed on the players that we brought in here in free agency. And, well, he could. I guess he could throw Ron Rivera under the bus, but he could say, I don't know what they were thinking taking Emmanuel Forbes in the first round. He's not an NFL player. He could say that. We won't. So he's not going to throw his players under the bus, but he's talking about communication, which has to get better as they get ready to play the Giants on Sunday. The amount of runs that Daniels had, 16 carries. In the entire time that Robert Griffin Jr. played in the NFL, he ran 13 times in one game. The most he ever ran was 13. So in his first game, he ran 16 times. True, he scored 2 touchdowns, but his helmet got knocked off twice. One of the touchdowns, Brian Robinson, was set up when he got helmet-to-helmet contact. Well, I mean, this is an obvious question that you have to ask. I mean, this is your rookie quarterback. This is the hope of the future. This is the guy you hope is going to last a long, long time and hopefully makes it through 17 games this year. You really want him running 16 times.
This is, I had a chance to go rip it to somebody else. Sometimes you can see a rush or a pattern break and there's open space and you go. But, for him, create it when it's there. When you can get outside the pocket. We'd love to see him remain a passer first. And I think it's going to come with more experience, Scott, honestly. When I can go extend it to throw it, when, hey, this play's over, I'll get rid of it and move on to the next play. So I think you'll see that trajectory continue, Scott, as we go. Certainly 18 carries is not the model, that we're looking for, certainly with Brian and Austin and others here. But at the end of it, I do think we'll continue to grow in that spot, but certainly not by design to have that many.
Yeah, so they want him to throw more. He actually didn't run 18 times. Quinn said maybe that's in the back of his mind, too. It's like, geez, he's running every play 18 times, 16 times. But, yeah, your quarterback needs to be a passer. In the win over Baltimore last week, you did have Lamar Jackson running 16 times, but Patrick Mahomes ran only twice. And Mahomes can run as well. I mean, he makes plays happen. But, he's got his veteran receivers. He knows what he's doing. He's won back-to-back Super Bowls, so he doesn't have to rely on that. And as Jaden Daniels gets more and more acclimated to the league, that's what you're hearing Quinn say. You need to think throw first. And he said not a lot of those were design runs. Some of them were, but, I can't imagine they went in with a game plan against Tampa saying, we want to run them all the time. And again, I felt like at times I was watching the Army-Navy game. Crazy. This last thing I pulled from Quinn yesterday, and coming up at 10 o'clock, I'm going to play about a 6 or 7 minute conversation that he had with Chick Hernandez of Channel 9, which he had every week. But this is about, and it's the word that is associated in many ways with Josh Harris because of what he did with the Philadelphia 76ers, and that's process. And, what you'll hear from a lot of rebuilding coaches is, don't look at the results, look at the process. And this is kind of what Quinn's saying after they got their doors blown off in Tampa.
Going in, I wanted to make sure we stayed true to the process. And I've been consistent with that to make sure I knew the work that the guys had put in leading into the game. And so because the performance didn't go as we want, doesn't mean you change your processes to go. And so we did do a good job taking care of the ball. The things that I wasn't as pleased with, our starting field position, the third down emphasis, where quite honestly, that's where a lot of the time of possession goes. So if I had to look back at it, Candy, and say the things that I learned, say, man, we've got to perform better on third downs on both sides of the ball. And that really affects, the field position, because I think our special teams, the cover group, and the guys have the ability to return can really affect the game. And so that's why when you miss some of those opportunities, it can really change field position. And whether it's, an out of bounds or, a missed opportunity, those are some things that I think we are really going to capitalize on moving forward. I love the fight and the attitude of the guys. We're going to make sure we get the play style aligned exactly like we want it. We didn't meet the mark that we've set for ourselves in this game.
All right. So, and you'll hear, by the way, every time he answers a question, you'll hear somebody's name included in the answer. That's what he does, and that goes a long way. Believe me, that's a good idea to ingratiate yourself to the people who cover you. They're all good reporters. They're not going to be co-opted or anything like that, but it's just good for the relationship overall. So every time he's asked a question, and at this point he's learned all the beat people that are with him every day, he addresses them by name several times in the answer, and that makes you feel good if you're, hey, the coach knows me. Oh, okay, that's good. That's a nice thing. All right, on the rookie quarterbacks from Sunday, none of them were really terrific. You did have one of them winning his game. And he was watched by Michael Wilbon, who's as big a Bears fan as there is, and Wilbon in watching the game sat with a bunch of Hall of Fame players, which is really cool. One of the privileges of being Mike Wilbon. But yesterday on PTI, Tony and Mike discussed the debuts of the three rookie quarterbacks from Sunday:
Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, and Bo Nix. Two of those three, Daniels and Nix, lost on the road, and your guy, Caleb Williams, won at home. What are your reviews of the rookie quarterback?
It's short and sweet. They look like rookie quarterbacks. They look like guys starting for the first game of their rookie seasons, which none of them should be. And they all start now for financial reasons, 90% financial reasons.
That's right.
And none of them should be starting because we don't necessarily, I didn't even think Peyton Manning and Troy Aikman should have been starting, but they shouldn't be starting, but they're out there. But the one thing, and I was at the Bears game, which you referenced.
With Hall of Famers. Sitting with Hall of Famers.
Yes.
Wearing yellow Hall of Fame jackets.
Richard Dent, Mike Singletary, Jimbo Covert.
Pretty good.
And my man Otis Wilson, who
Pretty good.
should be.
Otis, my man, as
Otis,
they say.
my man Wilson. And so watching a game with them is a little different. It is. Because the opinions you're getting are not just talking heads, and they're people who play for that franchise, and they're watching Caleb Williams very closely. The Bears' offense was what the Bears' offense usually is. At one point, somebody in the box says, well, the offense is going to make a play. And Richard Dent says, and I quote, have you been watching for the last 103 years? And it was a funny line at the time. But it's true. The Bears won as they always win.
That's why they win.
Defense and specials, and they're going to get better. They'll be fine later.
Yeah.
But those three rookie quarterbacks, and you got Daniels, and I'm sure you watched them closely. They look like rookies. It's okay.
Yeah. No, statistically, they didn't set the world on fire. Okay. Daniels had the best day. He had 184 yards passing and 88 yards rushing, and he had the highest rating. But his team got thrashed. They were never actually in the game.
Yeah.
Bo Nix completed 26 passes, only 138 yards, and he had two picks.
He's throwing sideways
Caleb Williams
passes.
didn't even get to 100. Did not get to 100.
Yeah.
He had 93 yards passing in 29 attempts, which is brutal. But he's on a team that has some receivers, and he's on a team that has a defense, so he can do something this year. The other two cannot. And it's right that you mentioned Troy Aikman and Peyton Manning, because even though they're in the Hall of Fame, their rookie years were tough.
Yeah,
Jaden Daniels. So I watched that. I flipped out of the red zone for periods of time to watch that specifically. I have two pieces of advice for Jaden Daniels. Keep your hat on, son. Keep your hat on.
Sliding school.
Because you lost it twice and you can get killed.
Yeah.
And two, don't rush 16 times. You're not Lamar Jackson. People in Washington remember Robert Griffin, how he got hurt.
Isn't he
can't
built
do it.
similarly to Robert Griffin?
Yes.
Great athlete, but not
Can't do
He's
it.
got to learn how to slide, by the way.
Yes.
A couple of he's doing that head first Pete Rose thing. That ain't going to get it, son.
Well, it's still better, Wilbon, as he remembers. It's still better than Robert Griffin, who didn't have any way to slide. At least he looked like he was protecting himself going forward. But on some of those head first slides, he's exposing his head going down, and you're going to have helmet-to-helmet contact, whether it's intentional or accidental. And that's something that you worry about. Because, look, during the preseason, when Daniels was playing against the Jets, the one series that he had against the Jets where he took him down the field and he scored, he took off on a run and dropped his shoulder as he was fighting for extra yards. And Dan Quinn talked about double secret probation. Now, we know it's the exhibition season. Certainly didn't want to get hurt during that. But you can't have your quarterback go out in the first game. Anthony Richardson is a terrific runner for the Colts. He looked absolutely great on Sunday. He lasted 4 games last year before his shoulder was injured, and he was out for the year. He's made it back from the shoulder injury. He can also throw. He had a bunch of yards throwing the football in the Colts' loss, but that's not sustainable. So they have to be concerned about that. Bo Nix, all of them are playing for teams that weren't very good last year, obviously, although the Bears benefited from what was obviously a great trade with the Carolina Panthers because they wind up with him, and they had a pretty decent team, the team that was expected to be at the very bottom of the league. And remember, they came here on that Thursday night game. They were 0-4, and they just clobbered the Commanders. That was basically the night that it officially ended for Ron Rivera. That Thursday night, I think they hung 40 on his defense, and so now he's joining a team that's better. And as Wilbon points out, it was really the defense that won the game. Throwing for less than 100 yards in your debut, that's not a good thing. And the one thing that you could really say about Daniels is he didn't turn the ball over, and that's important because Peyton Manning set the rookie record with 28 interceptions. They live with that. It's interesting with Troy Aikman, that comparison. And even the difference in the league and the 9 years between the debuts, they had changed the rules to some degree, not as much as they've changed now for quarterbacks. But when Aikman came in the league, man, you could just tee off on him. In fact, he recently talked about that. He said if the rules were the way they are now when he played, he wouldn't have played 12 years. He'd hung around a lot longer. And even after he left with 5 concussions, his last play of his NFL career, he got leveled by LeVar Arrington in a game at Dallas late in the season, never played again, and got into broadcasting after that. But even after a year or so out of the game, he was serious about coming back. And this is when Norv Turner was the offensive coordinator in Miami, coming back and playing because he was still in his mid-30s at that point. But the game was a lot more brutal on quarterbacks. And if you don't believe me, go back and watch YouTube, particularly of the famed Body Bowl game in 1990 when the Redskins played at Philadelphia and the Eagles knocked out 2 quarterbacks, forcing Brian Mitchell to finish up the game at quarterback. That was a different type of game. Peyton Manning comes in. The rules are still not as, tilted towards the quarterback as they are now. Now with these rookie guys where you can't really hit them the way you used to, you should be able to be more of a pocket passer than we saw from Jaden Daniels, and you should be able to complete some passes downfield and things like that. And that's really what they're looking for with Daniels. They're looking more for him to throw first. And they know his instinct is to run. He was so successful doing it at LSU last year. But this ain't LSU. This is the National Football League. We talk about unbreakable records in sports, and here's one of them. I guess you could also say Bo Jackson winning the MVP in the baseball All-Star game and playing in a football Pro Bowl in the same season. That's unbreakable. And in 1989, we had the draft, and as you know, Troy Aikman went number 1. Tony Mandarich, one of the biggest busts of all time, went number 2 to the Green Bay Packers. He was a steroid guy, and he was selling it as, chicken breasts and lots of reps. He was on the cover of Sports Illustrated as the Incredible Bulk, and they had pictures of him taking 2 shopping carts through a grocery store as if to say, oh, yeah, he's just loading up on lean food to get that body. Well, in fact, he was a big-time steroid eater, and they started testing for steroids. Once he got to the NFL, he had to stop taking them, and he stunk. He wasn't very good. The number 3 pick of that draft was Deion Sanders, taken by the Atlanta Falcons. And in those days, they didn't have a rookie salary cap. So the salaries were not slotted. And you had a lot of holdouts at that time. A few years later, Heath Schuler held out for the Redskins, missed a couple of weeks of training camp, which proved to be devastating for him as he was way behind. They threw him into an exhibition game, had to play him some as a rookie. He wasn't ready to play, and that happened with a lot of guys. And with Deion Sanders, not as crucial since he was playing corner and also returning kicks. So the fact that they didn't have a contract in place, not as big a deal. I don't think he participated in any of the offseason workouts for them, and the structure was a little bit different in those days. They had a mini camp. I don't know if he even showed up for that. He was playing baseball for the New York Yankees, and he wasn't playing baseball in the way that, 6 years earlier, that John Elway had done this with the Baltimore Colts. He signed with the Yankees farm team, and from what I understand, he was far from even the best baseball player on the Stanford baseball team, much less major league worthy. But he was signed by George Steinbrenner. Steinbrenner liked the publicity. He was a football guy. He had been an assistant football coach at one time in his life, and really got off on the idea of having John Elway play baseball for him. This wasn't the case with Deion. This was just a summer job. He thought, he played baseball at Florida State, went to some spring practices for them, played football in the fall, and was a good enough athlete to be a Major League Baseball player and one of the great football cornerbacks of all time. It's just what he did. He liked to do that. So his summer job was playing for the New York Yankees, and he took it right up to the deadline. Maybe he held out a training camp that year. I think he probably did. So no training camp. On September the 5th of 1989, he hits a home run for the New York Yankees. 5 days later, on this day 35 years ago, the Falcons opened up the season at Fulton County Stadium against the then Los Angeles Rams, who played in Anaheim. This was the team that would ultimately move to St. Louis and then come back to Los Angeles. But this is even before they went to St. Louis. And they open up the season, and here's Deion 5 days after wearing the pinstripes and hitting a home run for the Yankees, now wearing an Atlanta Falcons uniform when this happens. And wait till you get a load to who is calling color on CBS for the broadcast of this game.
This is a beauty, and Sanders retreats back to the 32, drops the ball again. Prime time, Sanders shows how he got his nickname as he goes all the way for a touchdown. Garland Thaxton with a great block to spring him on a 68-yard punt return to put Atlanta out in front.
Deion Sanders told us yesterday that for every touchdown he gets on a punt return, he will give the blocking people three choices: a Gucci watch, a bunch of money, or a gold chain. Right now, he just forked up about $5,000 of that bonus money he got yesterday.
You know what? He can afford it.
That is a younger Terry Bradshaw, obviously, before he went to Fox and became part of the studio show, doing color on CBS broadcast. I don't know who that was doing the play-by-play. I couldn't find that out. But, yeah, that was 35 years ago. And Deion promising gifts for his return people. I had to laugh at that because 11 years later, he comes to Washington, 2000, part of that big Danny Gold rush when, he had to have Deion Sanders and Bruce Smith and Jeff George and others. He thought he was going to buy his way to a championship playing fantasy football. Deion comes here wearing that famous burgundy suit, the burgundy and gold suit that he wore, and making all kinds of promises. And he was also still returning kicks. He had been through Atlanta. He had been through San Francisco. He had been with the Cowboys, and now he's coming to Washington to fulfill Danny's dreams, because a year before he had watched Deion come on the field for the Cowboys and return a punt for his team for a touchdown, and Danny said, I got to have this guy. And so Deion, who was aging at that point, said, okay, if we return 4 punts for a touchdown, I'm going to give Rolexes to everybody. 4 for the roll. And he wound up with one really good return. I think it was an overtime game against Tampa, which set up the game-winning field goal. He wasn't fast enough to take it to the house in those days. And by the end of the season, he had to give up returning punts because it was becoming embarrassing. The ball was bouncing off his face mask. But on this day, 35 years ago, that's the kind of athlete that he was. That's how great he was, that he could walk off the baseball field and 5 days later, with no training camp, show up and play for the Atlanta Falcons and return a ball for a touchdown. He also, that wasn't that season. I guess it was 2 seasons later, 91, if I'm not mistaken. He's playing for the Braves, and he's playing baseball and football at the same time. He's going back and forth, and that was the one where he famously dumped the water bucket on Tim McCarver. You may remember this. He had played in a game that day for the Falcons. I think they played in Miami, and he got on a jet or a helicopter or something, but he got to the game in time in Atlanta. He did not play. So that if you ever hear, Deion Sanders played in an NFL game and a World Series game in the same day. No, he didn't. He made it to the game in time. He was in uniform on the bench, didn't play. And Tim McCarver had been critical. I don't think he was doing it this time, but McCarver had been critical of Deion, that he wasn't fully committed to the Braves. Here's a chance to win a World Series, and what you're doing is you're splitting your time between playing football and playing baseball. If you're all in on the baseball, you should take a leave of absence or something like that from the Falcons and do that. And he didn't like that. Deion was unhappy with that, so he decided that he was going to show up Tim McCarver. And he goes, while McCarver is talking on the air, he gets a water bucket and dumps it on his head. And McCarver goes, oh, man, Deion, you're a real man. You're a real man. And I think even at that point, if they'd have gone to blows, McCarver might not have won, but at that point he was in his maybe 50s or 60s. He'd have gotten some shots in. That's how tough a guy he was. But there's no denying what a great athlete Deion was. Now, let's see what happens with his football. They got clobbered over the weekend by Nebraska. And this could be a long year for him. I don't believe that Deion is going to finish. I think he'll finish the season, but I don't think he's going to stay on at Colorado. He's done a lot of talking. He's written a lot of checks that his mouth may not be able to cash. And now he's got his son who plays. I think it's Shiloh is the one who plays in the secondary. He's out for a while with a broken arm, and his other son, Sador, who's the quarterback and maybe one of the top players drafted. He's throwing his team under the bus, talking about the protection he had, some wide receivers. There are fractures going on there that are going to open up much wider, and there's already been a lot of drama around that team with Deion refusing to answer questions from a CBS affiliate reporter, and also telling a reporter it's a columnist from the Denver Post that he can't ask questions at the news conference. There's a lot of things going on there, but when you think of the life and times of Deion Sanders and all the things that are involved, including this home run and a punt return, segueing into coaching, broadcasting, all the things that he's done. I mean, it's been remarkable. So it's the force of unbelievable athleticism. Don't let that be overshadowed by all the attention he brings to himself. And the ability to entertain. He is a guy that can keep you interested, laughing, whatever it is. He's got all that. And he's got a record that will never be broken, a punt return for a touchdown and a home run in the same week. Nobody's ever going to do that again. Coming up in the next hour, you hear from Dan Quinn and his conversation with Chick Hernandez of Channel 9. It's the Andy Pollard Show, ESPN 630. So a week ago, the name Thomas Hammock probably didn't mean anything to you, right? Thomas Hammock is enjoying his 15 minutes of fame, and it's such a wonderful thing. He's the coach at Northern Illinois. Unknown guy, played there, running a program that's considered to be a mid-major, and they get paid to lose, which is what was supposed to happen when they played at Notre Dame on Saturday. They were 28-point underdogs. They were paid $1.4 million to show up and to get clobbered by the Fighting Irish. But they had other ideas, and they won the game as the Irish missed a 62-yard field goal. In fact, it was blocked at the end of the game, and now he is the toast of the airwaves, as he was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and really has a good sense of humor. We're going to play some of that for you coming up in about 20 minutes or so. But the talk here in town is, oh, my God, we expected so much from the Commanders, and looks like they're a long way from being good. Now, I'd say this. If the team were still owned by Dan Snyder, we'd be sitting here saying, oh, my God, here we go again. This team is never going to get better. It's 25 years of the same old crap. Doesn't matter who they bring in as a coach. Doesn't matter who they bring in as a quarterback. 37-20, that's kind of what happens. I think that with new ownership and the fact that this is really their first year, it was too late for them to do anything last year, that there's a level of, okay, we'll sit back. We're used to waiting. We've seen this before, and we believe that things can get better because they actually have the structure of a real football team. They really were not a real football team before. They really weren't. I mean, if you have an owner who is meddling to the point where he's jumping off his yacht and telling you who to draft, as Jay Gruden put it, if you are so desperate that on the day of January 2nd of 2020, you wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and say, oh, yeah, it's a coach-centric operation, and we're turning everything over to Ron Rivera, who's never run a team before. He's coached a team, never run a team. He's going to run the whole thing. And that turned out, well, we're seeing the residue of that now. It's just a complete mess as they turned over half the roster in the offseason of his players. And you've already traded away the number one draft pick of 2 years ago in Jahan Dotson to the Eagles. And it looks like Emmanuel Forbes is on his way to playing himself out of the league. So that was a 4-year mess, not just record-wise, where they had only one of the 4 seasons where they didn't have a losing record. They did make the playoffs once, but that was backing in a weird way at 7-9. It was bad. Ron Rivera's a good man, good person, but in no way qualified to run your whole operation. Maybe he's a good head coach. He was in Carolina. Maybe he can be a defensive coordinator again. I don't know if that'll happen. We'll see how good he is on television. He's working for the NFL Network now. But that's what's left of the 4 years of Ron Rivera. So Dan Quinn is now in charge. He's very positive, does a lot of things well with the media, including addressing everybody by name when he answers a question. And, seems to be a good person and has had success. He's taken a team to a Super Bowl. Now, remember, the last time we saw Dan Quinn as a defensive coordinator, his team got clobbered at home by the Green Bay Packers. Jordan Love lit them up. And then he winds up here as the head coach, and that was part of the reason that, with all the excitement of a possible young offensive coordinator coming here or some other names that were thrown around, it's like, Dan Quinn, a retread. But he does seem to be a very likable person, and you have to give him time to get things going. That's the main thing. And in a town where we've looked at it with disgust for the last 25 years, I don't think we have to look at it with disgust anymore. There can be real optimism. And when the team tells you to be patient, I think there's reason to listen. Now, Quinn does something that he calls to tell the truth Monday. I think even he, at 53, is too young to remember what the words to tell the truth mean to people of my generation. So when I think of to tell the truth, I think of Bill Cullen and Kitty Carlisle. Now, those names probably mean nothing to you, but that was the television show to tell the truth. Now, there is a reference to this in movie culture in the last 20 years. Have you ever seen the movie Catch Me If You Can with Leonardo DiCaprio? It's about a guy who was a counterfeiter, and it's I think it's an excellent movie, really good movie. And he eventually winds up on To Tell the Truth, and the real person who DiCaprio plays, wound up on Frank Abagnale is the name in the movie. Tom Hanks is in it too, and he tells the truth. He's the one. They bring 3 people up, and then the panel has to guess which of the 3 is the real person that they're talking about. And they ask him questions to try and determine what it is, and then they all vote. Let's go to Kitty Carlisle. Which one is it? It's panelist number 1. Bill Cullen, who is it? Peggy Cass, who is it? And they go down the line. And then the real person would stand up, and the other 2 would kind of fake it, who's it going to be, and then the person would stand up, and then he would tell his real story. So when I hear Dan Quinn say To Tell the Truth Monday, that's what I think about, but it's more about players telling the truth about their experiences on the field, and it's like no holds barred as to what happened in the game on Sunday and how can they make it better. So Quinn does a weekly spot with Chick Hernandez on Channel 9. I think it airs Monday nights, and they put the product up on YouTube on Tuesday morning. So I pulled this morning. This is Quinn talking to Chick about exactly what To Tell the Truth Monday is all about.
Really getting to the truth of it, of the game, of the performance, win or loss, and never running from that truth. That's a really important process. So the first thing that we do, meet all as a group, and we talk about a lot of the things that we really take into our winning. And so that's the turnover margin, takeaways versus giveaways, our tackling margin, how many missed tackles versus how many tackles we broke. We get into penalties, that same margin, starting field position, and the last one for us is explosive plays, how many they had, we had. So we kind of think of it, Chick, like a head-to-head, what happens in those big 5 categories. Then we show a lot of the plays that were good or bad, ones we wanted to teach. And no sacred cows, no plays we're not going to show. Right. Everything's there, and that's the standard for the whole team, coaches included. Not to say that every play or call that we have is on point either. So what do you want to make sure you do is get to the lessons. And by telling the truth, you get to those lessons, and then you get to apply them for the week. Then once you're done with that game, you go from the big unit meeting, the team meeting, into the unit, offensively, defensively, special teams, more breakdown, and then into your own position, really refining the skills, the performance, where you're at, the play time, the situation. And so after you get done that, then you can clear that game. And then you get ready to move on to the next. So it's an important process every week, win or lose. Get to the truth of it, tell the truth Monday, and it's a really important day because if you BS yourself or don't hear it, you're not going to get the lesson that you needed for that day or something you need to emphasize for the next week.
I know for the fans out there, it's don't panic Monday because, online, which you don't pay attention to, smart man, it's insane out there because they've been starving for something.
Yeah, they love it so much, and I get that.
That's true. So when you look back at the film, I watched, I was there, and I saw a lot of missed tackles, and as a guy who, you've been teaching these guys for months, they've been tackling for years, I had to be disappointed to see that. Effort's not the right word. The outcome of what was going on.
Yeah, because you want your identity to come through, and that gets forged in the tough times, not in the easy moments. And when I said, doing hard stuff with good people.
Good edit. Good edit from you, by the way.
That's not in OTAs, and that's not in training camp. It's now. And having gone through tough days, tackle as well, plays well on third down on either side. Those are the things that you look back on later and say, that game, that was tough. That's where we had to fight through together and get things right. And so not tackling or play as well as we want to on third down, that to me is where, okay, that's part of Tell the Truth Monday, and that was this week's biggest part.
Right. Part of it is you got players, you look at Emmanuel Forbes, who clearly to the naked eye is struggling right now as far as just making the play. He grabbed the kid's face mask because he got beat. How do you approach a guy like that and get him, he's got skills. How do you get him to where you want him to be?
Yes, for Emmanuel, for any of his teammates, to make sure you look at the entire game. What'd you like? What would we do different? And then you put in things during the week to say, all right, what specifically are you going to work on this Wednesday, this Thursday, this Friday, heading into the next performance to make sure you're aligning your game exactly like you want. So we call it a work on chick. Hey, this is what you saw. This is what happened in the game. This is what I'm going to work on during practice. And if you do that over and over again, you keep refining it, that's how you get the improvement.
Right. I know it was disappointing. One of the positives, though, is your young quarterback who, when you look back at the tape, what did you see?
Yeah, I think number one, we knew this going in, but this is a guy who's got great poise. And going through the progressions, where to go, where to look. He's a absolutely rare competitor. And the things that I did know is when those opportunities that we may have missed, those are ones we're not going to miss very often.
Right.
And that's what I'm looking to see. It was a tough blitzing, good defense to go. So for his first outing to go against a good, tough unit, I thought that's exactly the type of environment you want to put him in a tough spot against tough people. And he did not blink.
One of the guys you mentioned in your press conference last night, B-Rob, Brian Robinson, your eyes kind of lit up. Now, you got one big play called back because the referee seeing eye dog was still stuck in the back. I'm not sure what that was.
I'll let you get in trouble for that one.
Yeah, I get in trouble.
You don't get in trouble.
I won't. I won't get fined because OZ, not quite a clip there when you turn your back, but that's okay. But he is a weapon in so many different ways.
Yeah, and I think that's what people are finding out. Not just carrying the ball.
Mm-hmm.
And so his ability in the pass game with him and Austin together, that's a hell of a 1-2 punch. And both of them made big plays in the pass game. Not all of them were down the field. So the catch and run ability for those two was on full display. And B-Rob absolutely illustrates what we're looking for as a commander. The toughness, the finishing, the physicality, the play style, it was on full display.
I asked you last night at the end of the press conference, would you bring a kicker in? You have made a move today. Cade York is now gone, missed 2 field goals, kicked 1 out of bounds. You're bringing in Austin Seibert as your new kicker. Have you ever been through this before? 5 kickers this early in the season?
You know, we haven't, but what I can say is it kind of speaks to we're not going to back off competing in any part of this program. Any part. We have really high standards for how we want to do things, and if they're not being met, then we're going to address them. And so the team deserves it, the fans deserve it, and so we're going to keep competing and keep battling and keep finding any edge to get to. And so we're looking forward to Austin getting here. We had the chance to see him at practice, and you did as well when we were up in New Jersey. He kicked him all the way through in the rain when we were up there, so I certainly remember that. And I'm looking forward to getting him here and getting started with him, and we're ready to get to work with him.
And we'll see you next Monday after a division game against the Giants. Home.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. We're really pumped to get the division underway. And to have it at home here with this crowd, with our fans, this team is going to be lit, and we're ready to show them that identity. We didn't get to fully express that in the way that we had. That's some of the disappointment that we carry with us today, is that we didn't play in that commander style that we've been talking about. You've seen it at practice, some of the preseason games, and so for us not to have that on display, fully formed, was disappointing for us. And so we have to own that. We will own that, and we're looking forward to making sure we put that on tape. On the field this Sunday afternoon.
That's Dan Quinn with his weekly spot with Chick Hernandez on Channel 9. Commanders with 3 points, 2.5-point favorites against a team that looked worse than they did in the opening week. Daniel Jones, since he signed that contract extension, because remember he got hurt last year, he has thrown more touchdowns to the other team, 3 pick sixes, than touchdowns to his own team, 2 of them. I mean, that's a remarkable stat. He's been horrible. The thing about Jones is he seems to have his best games against Washington. So the feeling after week 1, okay, you lost to a playoff team on the road, Baker Mayfield, once the number 1 pick of the draft, veteran quarterback. They got big wide receivers who worked your secondary. That's one thing. You lose to the Giants at home. And I'll be very interested to see the crowd makeup. They've been selling out. They haven't had any trouble filling the stadium over the last year. But for a number of games last year, in fact, most of the games, it was opposing fans. Eagle game, green. I was at the Dolphin game, aqua, And if it's a lot of blue on Sunday, I'll be surprised on 2 levels. One, that they weren't able to get a better grip on people buying the tickets, where more tickets being sold to people in this area. And two, that the Giant fans actually want to travel for this team. With both the Jets losing last night and the Giants on Sunday, both of them kind of lopsided games, there's a feeling in New York, and I worked there, I remember this, there's a feeling there, football season's over. You know, I bet you right now, if you listen to sports talk radio, excuse me, WFAN, they're talking about the Knicks right now. Maybe the Yankees and the Mets, and it is a baseball town. The Yankees will be in the playoffs. Mets may get there. Those are front burner things. Football, while it gets talked about here 12 months a year, no matter how bad the team is, in New York, they're ready to think about basketball season right now and the playoffs for baseball. And, yeah, things could change, and football's still the number one sport in America, but that's the way things work there. And I'm sure there are people walking around saying, well, that's it for football season. Let's go. Let's move on. Coming up, got the Bram Weinstein Show. I will see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.